I think that to a certain degree, Lubavitchers are more traumatized by Mashiach flags than non-Lubavitchers. That you write, that the people who are with you are Misnagdim Amitim, the real Misnagdim ki yodua, that today that concept doesn't exist.
How do you not get affected by that?
Again, the first step is to assume that people don't hate me. The Rebbe is very, very firm, and a person should be firm. But there's a difference between being firm versus reflecting hatred or animosity back towards someone. Not every single response has to be serious, and sometimes you accomplish a lot more with humor. There's no stira to being completely ecstatic and excited and proud of who you are, and seeing the milas of your fellow Yidden. What I would promote is genuinely see other people's milas.
What would you say is step one, beyond, let's say, stop using the label Misnagid? What would be step one to be able to engage people?
From a fellow Lubavitcher point of view, it's important not to disconnect yourself from any Lubavitchers. And spreading Chassidus doesn't necessitate the other person becoming Lubavitch. If a person is going to engage with the Yeshiva Shevelt, with the Lubavitcher world, you have to have an appreciation for them. You have to see their milas. That you have to actually, people who are opposed to Chassidus, calling them Misnagdim is actually ma'orer their Hisnagdus. And I believe it's not only calling it to people's faces, but even to oneself.
Welcome everyone to the podcast Ase L'cho Rav. The purpose of this podcast is to bridge the gap between Rabbanim and Mashpia and the Anash community. I am doing this with my friend Rabbi Eli Bassman, who is the menahel of several halacha and Chassidus projects.
Thank you, Levi. Baruch Hashem, is a zchus that I have the exposure to many prestigious Rabbanim and Mashpia who are often not given a proper platform. This podcast, Ase L'cho Rav, will give a voice to these Rabbanim and Mashpia to share their thinking, their hashkafa, Chassidus, a deep dive into their backstory to help uplift the entire community.
Please consider subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing, because that helps the algorithm bring it to more people, which changes lives and brings Mashiach.
Welcome to this exciting episode of Ase L'cho Rav, where I got the chance to sit down and have a fascinating conversation with a friend and colleague, Mashpia, in Cincinnati, Rabbi Eli Simpson. So we started off with a very interesting conversation about his family history. Two of the Rabbeim secretaries were his Zayda was the Rebbe's secretary, and his elder Zayda was the Frierdiker Rebbe's secretary, and then also was very close with the Rebbe. And we got to hear some very interesting insight into the process of how his grandfather interacted with the Rebbe in terms of writing letters, how that worked practically. And then we got into a fascinating conversation where Rabbi Simpson has a very unique perspective on are there Misnagdim nowadays, and this isn't just a philosophical exercise, but he actually discussed from what I hear, a very unique approach to engaging and networking and working with communities outside of Lubavitch that I think many of you will find fascinating and refreshing to hear a unique approach based on the Rebbe's works, but in my experience, not highlighted enough in are there Misnagdim nowadays. Hope you enjoy. If you have any feedback, please email me at rabbibassman@gmail.com. Thank you. Well, you'll have to excuse my amaratzis with your exactly where you fit into the Simpson family. I'm quite curious about on the topic of Ase L'cho Rav, there were a lot of chashuv and rabbanim and mashpiyim. So can you place yourself in that yichus?
Okay, so how exactly I emerged from that group of people is like a good question. But if you want to know a little bit about what the family tree is, the family comes from Babruisk, It was a Lubavitcher family. The Zayda, the Elter Zayda, his name was Reb Shimon Aaron. He was I don't know if he was a watchmaker or some type of technician. He had, I think, four sons, four or five sons. The first two sons, this was during the time of the Haskalah, the time of all of the different isms that were going on then in Russia. The first two sons went off the path when they were young. So when he saw that and came to my Alta Zeta was 12 years old at that time. Rabbi
That's your
Yaichel,
name.
family name was Yaichel. I'm sorry,
Yeah, okay.
that was the family name. Yaichel means chicken soup. Um,
What was his first name? This is Yael.
Elio,
Oh yeah, it was the one you're named after.
that right.
That's your Elder Zayda.
That's my Alta Zeta.
Okay.
So when he was 12 years old, his father dropped him off on Lubavitch. Basically came, dropped him off. There was no class for him then, but he dropped him off. Finished. He didn't want him to go in the same path like his brothers. He dropped him off. Rashbatz, who was the Mashpia at that time in Lubavitch, this was, I think, Tafresh Samach Aleph, if I'm not mistaken. He expressed himself. He said, "Mekumchin midavigalach." They're coming already with their baby carriages. They basically wanted to send him home, but he had a cousin over there. His name was Chaim Itkin, and he was a little older than him. He said, "I'll take him under my wing." So he stayed, and he stayed in Lubavitch, I think, between 10 and 15 years. Like he stayed, he was
How old was he when he came?
12 years old
12.
when he came. They opened up a class for him. And yeah, the rest is history. He became a mashpia for a short time in Odessa, I believe. And then in Tafresh Pei Gimel, 1923, his brothers had emigrated to America around 20 years earlier, and they arranged for him to come to America. So he came to America in 1923.
What was his position? He was a
He was a Rav.
was it of
He was a Rav. He had a
the
shul.
shul in Crown Heights.
No,
Yeah.
not in Crown Heights. He was in the Bronx. He was in Borough Park. And then when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, he became his gabbai for Yechidus. Especially later on when it was difficult to understand the Frierdiker Rebbe after the stroke, it was hard to understand him. So he would go in with people for Yechidus and he would explain to them what the Rebbe had said.
So was he like when the Rebbe became Rebbe, or like even the days of the Frierdiker Rebbe, was he considered like the Rav in America for Lubavitchers? Was he
I wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, there were a number of Chashiv Rabbanim, the Lubavitcher Rabbanim. There was obviously Reb Shmuel Witten and others, but he was a Rav. He was definitely from the elder Chassidim and definitely a Chashiv.
Who did the Rebbe ask Shilas to at the time when the Rebbe,
Yeah, he was not the person that the Rebbe would ask Shilas to.
would the Rebbe ask him about Minhagim? I know by Rosenfeld here in Pittsburgh, he often tells me that there were certain Minhagim that the Rebbe would go to Rabbi Simpson to get his
Yeah, you can see it
of his
sometimes in the
balance.
Rishimas Devarim that took place during the meals. You can see sometimes there's a discussion over there where the Rebbe asks, and then even when the Alter Zayda kind of said that the minig was one way, the Rebbe will push back and say, "Are you sure that the minig was that way?" My Alter Zayda was smart enough to keep quiet at those points.
Got it. Very interesting. And you never you didn't meet him. He was already passed away before you were born, right?
Named after him.
Yeah, after right. And your father was
Exactly. So then after that, then my Zayda, Alav Shalom, was a maskir by the Rebbe, and all of the letters would go through him. The bar mitzvah letters, chasana letters, all the other letters would go through him for about 40 years. Began working for the Rebbe even before his chasana.
So that's very interesting. How did that work with the Rebbe's letters? In terms of storing them and keeping records. Was that something the Rebbe requested to be done? That there would be a copy of each letter, and
Right. So there was.
How did they store it? There was just a filing cabinet.
Yeah, the letters were archived, and they were stored. The Rebbe kept a copy of the letters, and There was also the English letters as well, which Rabbi Mendel would type up. He actually kept a copy for himself
He was the
privately.
main masker that dealt with letters. So like the other maskidus, didn't deal with the Hebrew letters.
But there were other maskirim who dealt with the letters. There was Rabbi Quint, there was Rabbi Shalei Berotstein. The other maskirim that we're familiar with, like Rabbi Groner, Rabbi Klein, Rabbi Krinsky, obviously Rabbi Chadikov, they were not specifically involved with the letters. They were involved with other inyanim.
So
Many
like
minus
someone
went
would
through them.
call, they would deal with phone calls,
Yeah, other
the
things.
the written correspondence.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. When the Rebbe did all the response, so what did your Zayda do? He would type up what the Rebbe wrote, or
He would either
what would
type
the,
up.
what would the system be?
So it depends. There was different letters, and I'm not familiar exactly the way it was in the earlier years. In the later years, obviously, the answers were much more standardized. So whether it's a bar mitzvah or a chasana or a bris or whatever, he would type up the letters. The letters would be given into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would sign them. If the Rebbe would add whatever he wanted to add, but the letters are pretty much standardized by the time that I remember from, which is the late Mems and the early Nuns. Yeah.
So and before then, you're saying you didn't
Before
have too
then,
much
so
Zayda.
again, he was invited. You can see if you go through the Igris, you can see certain letters that are signed by my Zayda. You'll see Shin Simpson Maskir. Sometimes the Rebbe would actually sign my Zayda's name for whatever reasons known to him. He wanted it to look
So when
like it.
your Zayda signed a letter, that meant the Rebbe dictated the Teichen and he just wrote it down in his own words.
Yeah, I don't know that there was necessarily a difference if the Rebbe signed or if the Masker signed. All the letters went through the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was Magia all of the letters. For whatever reason, he wanted it to go through a Masker, which should say the Masker's name, but there's no difference as far
So
as
the Rebbe
the
would dictate the response, he would type it up, and the Rebbe would check it over.
right,
So
right.
he would sit in the Rebbe's room with like a
Yeah,
typewriter, or
yeah. Certainly in the early years, yeah.
how many hours a day did the Rebbe spend responding to letters?
That I don't know. I know once my father told me that the Zayda was sitting in the room and like all of a sudden he just became like he was watching the Rebbe. I think it was maybe answering the letters. And the Rebbe would this is known from other places also, because my Zayda didn't really speak much, but the Rebbe would read a letter and then answer the letter while reading the next letter. So I'm not sure if that's what he was watching, and he was clearly awed by something that was going on, and the Rebbe basically told him, "You look there, do cook Darton, like the, you know,
But something you
you may
sometimes
look."
see the Rebbe, there's an 8-page letter in Hebrew and in English that was all dictated by the Rebbe and someone else typed it.
Yeah,
Or
but
like,
in Klali, the Rebbe dictated the letters. Certainly, it was that way with the English letters. I know for sure with the Hebrew letters. I'm sorry that I don't know the extent of what was dictated and what was written, but that's the way it seems to me.
right,
Ultimately, everything was mugge by the Rebbe, every word that went out in the final draft.
right, right. And your father got the job because his father was already a masker by the Frierdiker Rebbe. Like, there was a hemshech, or was
My
like
Zayde, yeah. So when the
Zayda?
Rebbe took my Zayde, the Rebbe told him that I know that your father is known as a Baal Sod. He says my Alta Zayde was known as a Baal Sod. General, the Rebbe Marash says that there's three Madregas in a Baal Sod. Obviously, all three of them keep the secret, otherwise you're not a Baal Sod. But the first Madreg is you see that the person has a secret, but he's not going to say it, but he's mamish a halzachain. The second Madreg is that you don't even see that the person is holding a secret. The third Madreg is that after the secret comes out through some other channel, he never lets on that he knew the secret in the first place. So that was my Alta Zayda.
So these questions I'm pushing you for, you tried asking your Zayda a lot of questions, and
My Zayda really
you get a lot of information.
nothing really came out from there. Whatever happened in his room, or whatever happened in his work, or in the letters, or whatever, he took with him. It didn't, yeah. I
Wow.
never told my Zayda, I'm taking you because I know that your father is like that, and probably it's in the genes.
And the
So
genes.
I'm paraphrasing.
I mean,
Yeah.
the Rebbe used to say about himself that he wasn't very good at keeping secrets. Again, meaning if he was told something, it was assumed it was going to be publicized.
Whatever that means,
Whatever that means,
yeah.
right? Um, so the one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you in specifically, besides um, all the amazing things you're involved with in the yeshiva and so on and so forth, is when I was reaching out to some of my chavedim involved in Kollel Lem Dedach, I was I I was told that if you want to speak to someone was tutzich and afatas amayonos in a very unique way with the olam halitoi. So Rabbi Simpson has a koch and a chush in that area. Spoke to a shliach in Lakewood. He told me you got to go to Cincinnati to Rabbi Simpson. So what what how did you get involved in that tchum? It's not, I wouldn't say every Lubavitchers Isaac and that type of avoida.
Okay, so the Cincinnati community is an interesting community. It's a Weltische community, Elmische community that's been around for a long time. Obviously, there was Rabbi Silver was here, um, and the community was B'ofen klali, a small community. When we came down over here for the yeshiva, which is we're starting now our 20th year,
Oh wow.
there was a kollel that had moved to town 10 years earlier, around Tufshin and Dalid and Hay. That's when the Litvish kollel opened up over here. And so when we came here, the community wasn't really, I wouldn't call it a Litvish community. There was the kollel had brought in some of that Litvish flavor, but it was more of like just a regular, Weltische out of town community. As the years went on, um, more and more families, what we call Litvische, Yeshivische families, moved to town. And over time, the makeup of the town changed. So that, for example, when we moved down, the day school was boys and girls, and they were only separate for seventh and eighth grade, Limudei Kodesh. And today you have a separate, boys' school, girls' school. They're separate all the way through, all the way down to first grade. That reflects the changing demographic of the Frum community. So as the community changed, the type of people that you interact with changed, and I got to know a lot of very very fine people, very geschmack chevra, from the Litvish community, from the general community, and as is the nature, you get to know somebody, you start to schmooze, you talk, and of these things, different chavrusas came up, different limudim came up, and things developed. Nothing formal. It's not like I have it's an organization, and Hagam, like you said, is maybe not necessarily that a lot of Lubavitchers are in this space, which lav dafka that's something that is a good thing. I mean, I think everybody should reach out to whoever they have a shaykhs to. The poil, I don't know how many Lubavitchers live in these types of communities where you have these opportunities, but I would definitely encourage everybody to get involved in whichever capacity they can in the area of Hafatzas Hamayonis.
I had an interesting conversation with a certain Lubavitcher Rav, and the conclusion of the conversation was that he lived through the lamids and the mems and the nuns and the covet of the Rebbe and so on and so forth with the new somewhat emergence of certain Misnagdim. The tone of him and his colleagues and all the kilu to be a chassid and to not have resentments or strong resentments against Misnagdim was considered like almost inappropriate. And I was proposing to him, that kilu, maybe now those that grew up in the Samachs and later, because we didn't have as much firsthand exposure to the Misnagdim, so we're more neutral. It's kind of like you live in a town and everyone's friends. But if you went through those years of resentment, it becomes so much harder to build these relationships.
Absolutely. There's a word for that. It's called trauma. And We carry a lot of trauma. Chabad carries a lot of trauma, no question. And to be honest, the Lubavitcher world also carries a lot of trauma from Chabad as well. There's enough trauma to go around. Um, I think it's important to distinguish people's hergation of what they felt or what they feel constituted standing up for the Rebbe's kavod versus the Rebbe's perspective on these inyanim. And it's perhaps more appropriate to adapt the Rebbe's outlook at this. When the Rebbe says, beginning right away in the Yuds already, the Rebbe is writing that there are no Misnagdim. You can look in the Igris. It's very clear. The Rebbe is saying as early as, I don't know, Tafshin Tesavav, there's a letter where the Rebbe is saying that, I think he's writing maybe to Peretz Mochkin, I forget exactly who it was, that you write, that the people who are with you are Misnagdim Amitim, the real Misnagdim, ki yodua, that today that concept doesn't exist. We know that doesn't exist today. There are no real Misnagdim. I like to tell people that Misnagdosaurus rex is a dinosaur that died a long time ago. It doesn't exist. And if you adopt the Rebbe's point of view that there are no Misnagdim, so you're not looking for people, like they tell the story about the Japanese soldier who was in the 1960s. He was still hiding in the jungle. He thought that World War II was still going on. You're not looking for you're not looking for enemies under every rock. You know what I mean? There's
in my limited I looked in Rabbi Zeligson's big fat mafteach. He didn't even have an erech from Misnagdim in his mafteach. When I looked in Eitzar HaChochma, it's interesting. The Rebbe did use the term Misnagdim. It was maybe more like Purim Sichas and so on and so forth. But you see it in the Yuds and the Chafs, and then kind of in the late Chafs and early Lamids, and like Shalach Lamed Ches is the first Sicha where the Rebbe actually, which I saw again in my limited research, where the Rebbe, it seemed to become more of a pattern where the Rebbe said like, there's no more in the late Lamids and so on. That there was, the concept of Misnagdim is, like you said, is extinct.
I'm saying it's much earlier than that, and even in the earlier Sichos where the Rebbe is talking about Misnagdim von Amol, the Rebbe talks about divos rufen sich Misnagdim. The Rebbe is always talking about the Miskaria, the people who like to adapt that name, but the Rebbe is being very, very clear that that concept doesn't exist. It's not to say that everybody is our friend. It's just to say that the concept of Hisnagdus to Chassidus no longer exists.
How could you explain that a little more? What does that mean?
It's very important to distinguish between the ideas of Chassidus versus specific Chassidic groups, or versus Chabad as an entity and the people that are involved in Chabad, again, as opposed to the ideas that Chassidus stands for. There's no opposition today to the ideas that Chassidus stands for. For example, if you're going to give over a Chassidic idea, you'll say it over in the name of some Litvische Gadol, nobody is going to have any problem with the idea. There's no issue. There's no hisnagdus to Chassidus. Now, people might not like certain individuals because of whatever personal reasons they have, or because of whatever, Lashon Hara that they heard, or because of whatever reason it is. That's a personal inyan, but that's not a hisnagdus to Chassidus per se. There is no more hisnagdus.
You mean like concepts in Tanya?
Concepts in Tanya, there's nobody nobody would speak a word against Tanya today. Yeah.
But there are strong philosophical differences, particularly ideas that Rebbe was mechadish in terms of afatas hamayanos and how far to go and so on and so forth. But Kilu and Madregas of Achdas Hashem, that's less of a debate.
Even the inyanim that the Rebbe was mechadish, again, those inyanim, take out the word Chabad and give over the concept as a concept. Nobody has any issues with it. Even take, for example, something that in its day was majorly controversial, like mitzvah tefillin, which back in the day was terribly controversial. How could you put on tefillin on a yid who didn't go to the mikveh, let's say, right? However you want to describe it. Today, you have no problem people putting on tefillin, not Lubavitch, Weltische, there's no hisnagnus to that concept. The biggest joke, the worst thing somebody's going to tell you is, hey, you put on tefillin on a goy, kilo. But the idea of putting on tefillin on a yid that is actually a yid, the fact that he's not frum, there's zero hisnagnus to that concept today. In fact, there's a concept today called Project Inspire, which basically is taking what we call miftzoyim, whether it's Shalach Manis, or it's Shofar, or it's Megillah, or it's Chanukah, or Tefillin, or whatever it is, and encouraging people to reach out to their non-frum neighbors and to get them to do a mitzvah. What is that? That's what's saying. These are things that the Rebbe introduced. There's zero hisnagnus to this.
So how did Rabbi Simpson, most of the Lubavitchers that I encounter are still struggling with this trauma on certain levels, and many to the extent that it's hard for them to have a conversation with a divas rufen zichon misnagdim without just completely turning them off by having this venom and just not being able to stand in their presence without biting their heads off. How did you kind of get over that? Did you go to special Misnagid therapy? Did you have some sessions to work through this trauma?
So step number one is that we don't use the word Misnagid in Cincinnati. That word is not used in any of its various forms, not Misnagid, not
Who's
snag.
we? I mean,
we, the royal we.
Royal we, okay.
Meaning, we don't employ that word called Litvishe, Yeshivishe, etc. We don't, in other words, I don't use that word not with other people, and I don't use that word with myself. And when I encounter somebody who throws out the word, I'll be very careful to correct them. Like a person who's laning and makes a mistake in the Kriya, we'll be very, very careful to correct them and explain that there are no misnagdim. So the first thing is we don't.
Although the Torah has some issues with correcting people publicly, but the Rabbeim were corrected people.
I consider myself like the Gabbai who's standing next to the Balkoire, who's allowed to very quietly untersagen and tell him that needs to be corrected. So I forget where I saw it. Going back to the early days of Chassidus, it's brought down either in the name of the Baal Shem Tov or whoever, one of the early generations of Chassidus, that calling people who are opposed to Chassidus, calling them Misnagdim, is actually ma'oirer their hisnagdus. And I believe it's not only calling it to people's faces, but even to oneself. In other words, when a person looks at other people as the opposition, as the enemy, as people who are out to get you, that is not healthy. So the first thing is the internal talk. Person has to understand and recognize and really believe that there are no misnagdim. If you go out into the world and you look at people as fellow Yidden without any, you don't believe in any type of hatred towards you, you will automatically engage them from a more positive place. You're much less defensive. And when you're much less defensive, then when you're more open towards other people, you're not feeling threatened by them, then automatically they're more comfortable with you, then they're more open to you. So the step number one, as far as the therapy, where you're talking about it, getting rid of the trauma, is actually convincing yourself and recognizing that what the Rebbe says is true. Going back again all the way to the early years, going back to the Yuds from the beginning of the Nesius, that there are no misnagdim. You have to literally chazer it ein in your head again and again and again, and actually convince yourself that that's true. And when you adopt that posture and that attitude, all of your interactions are coming from a totally different place. You're not looking at the other person as your opposition. You're looking at it as a fellow Yid, and two fellow Yidden can have a conversation about anything.
This podcast is sponsored by Smichas Chaver Chabad, Halacha U and Women's Halacha Circle. In over 100 communities around the world, Halacha for everyone. Halacha curriculum that we provide for your community to teach the halachas, to engage people in halacha, to make halacha interesting, We have Smichas Chaver Chabad for Anash communities. For those that have a yeshiva background, we have Halacha U, which are advanced courses being taught in Chabad houses around the world. For those that don't have a yeshiva background but want serious, roll up your sleeve learning, super engaging, take them through the journey of the halacha down to the super, super practical. Every 6 months is a new topic. After Pesach, we are starting the sugya of workplace halachas, the laws of ribis, the laws of baltolin, paying your workers on time, and the laws of yichud. Fascinating sugyas. We have it on various levels for those that have a yeshiva background, those that don't have a yeshiva background, for women as well. Check out scpchabad.org or halachayu.org. Click join to schedule a meeting with me to learn more. This podcast is sponsored by Koilel L'Loimdei Dach. Revolutionize your limud Chassidus. Join over 200 shluchim and anash that are taking their limud Chassidus to the next level. In Koilel L'Loimdei Dach, you have expert Mashpiim, Rabbi Asher Farkash, Rabbi Yosef Klein, Rabbi Yitzchak Coffin, numerous guest Mashpiim that learn Chassidus in a unique way, broken up by sugyas. Every 2-3 months, we take a new sugya and we dissect it from its haskalah to its avodah, level by level. For bringing on the sugya, discussing the avodah aspects of the Suda, the practical application of the Suda. Schedule a conversation today with the Menal Poyel or Paltiel and learn Chassidus like you have never done before. So, just to be, let's say, to try to defend the many Chassidim that do passionately stick with these titles, although the Rebbe often quoted from the Sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the term Misnagdim was invented by the Misnagdim and so on and so forth. But I can show you more than 3 Sikhas where the Rebbe was referring to current Misnagdim, not just in an historical way. And it is something that clearly isn't completely, every klal is a yotzim in a klal. In other words, it's not as if the Rebbe used the term misnagid, and this is something that is very, very prevalent by Alter Chassidim and Chassidish Yidden. This was an extremely common term in my upbringing, but it wasn't just the people that were out of the mainstream that were using this term. The greatest of the great, by almost every other Farbrengen, this was one of the most common terms. I was probably called a Misnagid myself by a Farbrengen, 5,000 times. So this is an extremely prevalent concept. So, is there any legitimacy to this? Are you essentially saying we should wipe it off completely, and it's completely, there's no place for it, and there really isn't such a it's easy to be able to say, find sichas where the Rebbe said there's no misnagid, but in the lexicon of Chassidim, this is such a common concept. How could Rabbi Simpson from Cincinnati almost? Is he taking this too much of an extreme? He's finding one letter, the Rebbe, 6 times the Rebbe said there's no misnagdim, so there's no more misnagdim, case closed.
Okay. First of all, it's not one letter, it's bligvul letters. Second of all, even if it was one letter, that would be enough. Third of all, I'm not arguing about the historical concept of a misnagid, right? Like we said, that's a historical fact. I mentioned earlier, it's a dinosaur. That existed a long time ago, that no longer exists. I'm not arguing whether there were Amol Misnagdim. That's a historical fact. There were Misnagdim. Today, there is no Hisnagdus to the ideas of Chassidus. Again, there may be people who interfered with certain activities that Chabad wanted to do, but that didn't come out of an ideological, aliba de emes. There is no ideological issue that can actually be defined as such, other than I don't like Chabad, which is a personal animus that a person can carry. But an ideological, for a person to give a coherent ideological Hisnagdus to Chassidus, like the Misnagdim of yore, of 200 years ago, that they were actually choished that the Chassidim would go off, and there was a real fear over there because they were not familiar with what Chassidus was. That concept no longer exists. If you want maybe like a mushal for the Inyan, there's a famous Kotzke Vort. We know that the Rambam was koifer in the Metzias of Shedim, and so the Gra famously in the Bir Agra on Yeredeya, he goes off on the Rambam, that the Rambam was influenced by the various Greek influences that he read, and he says, "Was heißt the whole Gemara is filled with this concept of Shedim and of Kishuf and these types of things. It has to, of course, it existed." So the Kotzker Rebbe famously was asked this question. Was heißt, and the Rambam on the one hand says this, and the Gemara on the other hand says this. So he says, of course, Shedim existed. We have to say that they existed. The Gemara talks about it, but from the time that the Rambam was koifer in their existence, they ceased to exist. So you can say perhaps, yes, of course, Hisnagdus existed back in the day, but certainly beginning with Der Ashvi for sure. The Frierdiker Rebbe, you'll still find the term Misnagid used without the disclaimer of those who call themselves Misnagdim. You can still find that term used. But in the Rebbe, it's always with a disclaimer. Always. I'm not Baki in all of the Sikhs and Igris, etc. From what I can see, it's always those who call themselves Misnagdim, but never as an actual entity. And certainly in Der Ashvi, the Rebbe was koifer in the whole concept of Hisnagdus. And
so what changed from the Dar Ashishi to the Dar Ashvi? Meaning, was there such a? Officially, the argument of the Rebbe is that already in the days of the Tzemach Tzedek there was no more Misnagdim. So the Frierdiker Rebbe seemed to. Was the Rebbe almost trying to bring people together, and therefore he emphasized the points we agree upon more than the Frierdiker Rebbe? Like, how do you see this historically? I know you recently came out with a fascinating podcast on the Yom of history, but like historically, how do you see that shift?
So honestly, I'm not really so much interested in the historical of when Misnagdim ceased to be Misnagdim. That to me is not as interesting as the opportunity that the Rebbe initiated by being mevatel the whole concept of Hisnagdus. So as far as going back to the Tzemach Tzedek, and again, I'm not familiar with the particulars of that, of at what point there were Hisnagdim or there weren't Misnagdim. The main akuda to me is that the Rebbe is telling us that today there is no Hisnagdus, but mainly that there are no Misnagdim. Lepoil Mamish, on a practical level, of course the Rebbe is trying to bring together Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael needs to come together. The reason for this is because Mashiach needs to come. And the Medrash says that Ein Yisrael Nigol not Sheyaso Aguda Achas. So you didn't have to have you didn't have to come together and be ba'achdus. But I don't think that the Rebbe is saying this keilu, the Rebbe is trying to impose a reality. There's no question that the terms that we use and the words that we use and the way that we speak actually forms the reality. But the Rebbe is saying things the way he sees it. And the Rebbe says that there's no Hisnagdus. We have to, in the same way that the Rebbe says that Mashiach is dumb, that's a reality that the Rebbe sees. In the same way, the Rebbe says that
is this reality similar to that reality?
Absolutely.
Meaning, like a good person like me, I don't necessarily see Mashiach, although in the last year things are even becoming obvious to people like me. But it does appear from this would fit with the Rebbe's style of really pushing the envelope even beyond the surface, because the Rebbe dealt with Misnagdim to himself. In other words, when we say the word Misnagdim, so there were people that despised the Rebbe and the Rebbe's agendas to an extreme. Would you not label that a person like that as a Misnagid? And it does appear that the Rebbe was very frustrated by this. We have live footage of this, where in other words, viewers would argue back, Rabbi Simpson, what do you mean? The Rebbe had so much agmas nefesh from significant, maybe minority segments, but pretty substantial, important people in the Olam HaCharedi, the Olam HaLitoi, and Panovich, and so on, and even in the United States, and so on and so forth, even before, that were Misnagdim. and Misnagid to the Rebbe and his agendas and some of his huge, big initiatives, and maybe even the Rebbe wasn't successful in some of them because of them, at least with Das Tachten. So wouldn't you label a person like that as a Misnagid?
No, not every person who is nasty to me do I have to label him as a misnagid. I can say he's being nasty. I can say he's interfering. I could say he's an obstacle. I can say that he is, he's preventing maybe the hatzlacha of the work that we're trying to further. But a misnagid is a particular flavor where it comes from a philosophical place that the person actually believes that there's a problem over here with Chassidus. And that concept, I don't believe exists. There were people who felt maybe personally intimidated or personally had issues or personally maybe didn't like Chabad or things like that. That doesn't give them necessarily the label Hisnagdus in the way that the Rebbe defines that label.
So, in your estimation, the Rebbe didn't want to push them away to the point of labeling them Misnagdim, even though they were acting like Misnagdim.
No, the Rebbe didn't call them Misnagdim because he didn't believe that these things were coming from an ideological place.
In other words, I guess what I'm saying is it possible that in the Mems and the Nuns, maybe the Misnagdim reemerged? As the Rebbe said, people, Misnagdis is reemerging. So we saw in the Chofs and the Yuds and the Lamas, but where things taka were improving, but maybe there was a left turn in the Mems, and then we now there are Misnagdim.
I don't think Trias Mason didn't happen yet, and I don't think that it happened in the Mems of the concept of Hisnagdus. Again, there are people who can have a personal animus, people who have personal issues. There could even be people who maybe it comes from a upbringing, or even people maybe that it comes from Shalei L'Shem Shamayim. It comes from whatever. There's many reasons why a person can can speak against Chabad or can have some sort of issue with Chabad, but that if it's not coming from a philosophical place that a person can clearly define and put on paper on a way that we could say, oh, this is a taina, then that's not hisnagdus by the Rebbe's definition.
So how do you engage with someone that, or let's say someone has issues with your Rebbe, and really, so it seems to me that the area of Afatas Hamayonis that we've made the least headway. We've been successful, obviously, with Afatas Hayados, with the secular, with the modern Orthodox, with the Chassidic Olam. But the Olam Alitoi, for many Lubavitchers, you're dealing with a group of people that they hate your Rebbe, or they oppose your Rebbe, and they, so how do you get past that? And do you, what's your, how do you not get affected by that?
Again, the first step is to assume that people don't hate me. That's my assumption walking in. I have to walk in with a non-defensive posture. I'm not assuming that people dislike me. I'm not assuming that people dislike my Rebbe. I'm not assuming that. That's not my assumption. And even, in other words, when a person is, when you're koifer in someone else's antagonism, when you don't buy into it, there's a limit to how much a person can keep punching when the punching bag is not punching back. There's a limit. In other words, sometimes a person comes in with, again, because of the way that he was raised, or because of the way that the atmosphere that he was in, or because of a vart that he heard, or because something that was presented to him in a certain way, that he comes in with a certain, you can call it venom even, or a certain antagonism. But when he encounters an actual individual who is acting like a mensch, because he is a mensch, and it treats him with respect because he deserves respect, and who's engaging him from a place of Avos Yisrael, and is treating him like a human being and giving him the respect that he deserves, then there's a limit to how much you can hate such a person and keep on bashing and bashing and bashing. I mean, I've seen people who started off on one end of the spectrum, to the point of literally uis zidlen Lubavitch and this, that, and the other thing, and they became full. They made a complete 180, complete 180. I mean, from the extreme to the other end completely. How did that happen? It came from engaging people with love. The bottom line is that when somebody punches you, the inclination is to punch back. That's a natural instinct that a person wants to fight back. The problem is, Lubavitchers, Chassidim in general, but Lubavitchers befrat, we're just not good at fighting people. We're not good at punching people. We're not good at negativity. We're just not good at it. Our power is chesed. That's what we're called chassidim. Our power is.
Can I ask a chutzpah question? And you call me out for this. There's a video of the Rebbe engaging someone from, quote unquote, someone that calls himself a Misnagid, and the Rebbe is not showering him with love, meaning it could be some interpret that as kind of, this is how you should engage a person that calls himself a Misnagid. Throw the book at him and debate him, and it's very sharp. And the Rebbe's sichos, when he's kilu, someone can argue, showing us how to engage people that are giving us a hard time. The Rebbe is fire and brimstone.
Not at the person. There was no ad hominem attack in that particular incident.
But at the way he engaged him in the arguments, the philosophical arguments, it was the way you're describing it. I didn't see that tone.
The Rebbe is very, very firm, and a person should be firm. But there's a difference between being firm versus reflecting hatred or animosity back towards someone. There's no animosity in what the Rebbe is was saying to that other person. There's maybe pain. There's maybe, I don't know if I could use the word frustration, or there's a deep pain. You could say that the Rebbe has from it. It's real. It's pain, right?
But if I were to engage someone, sorry for interrupting. I have a lot of experience in this specific arena, so I'm kilu speaking a little devil's advocate. But at every community that I've been in for the last 20 years, I've always sat in the Olam Shekaylim and really engaged as a peer. And I did not engage in any sort of debates, and I never found that even non-personal debates, just dribbling zich in the matters of debate, ever helped anything.
Absolutely.
So I'm just wondering, when we see the Rebbe engaging in the philosophical, punching bag of concepts, it's like the Rebbe came with very sharp Russian, no garbage when it came to his antagonists versus just ignoring them. I'm just wondering, is the Rebbe setting a tone here that you should engage? If they say something sheker, you have to call them out, and they call it kutesichas amaratzis, you have to prove them that's the biggest chachmas in the world, or become their friends, and maybe 10 years down the line, though the approach you're presenting here, which I has worked for me as well. Didn't come across when the Rebbe dealt with his antagonists. That's not the way I saw it. Meaning, when the Rebbe dealt with a secular Yid, here's someone that's B'chalo Shabbos, Eichel Nevelos V'Treves, Boyel Aroyis, it was always smiles and love. But when it came to a frum Yid that Kilu attacked Lubavitch, the Rebbe took it much more personal, and it was much more of intense pushback.
Again, not against the person. And I would say in that particular incident that you're referring to, not even necessarily from a philosophical point of view. The Rebbe was actually pointing out historical truths to that person. He didn't really engage in philosophy or theology with that. The Rebbe is pointing out historical truths, that Chassidim and the Lubavitchers got along in the times of the Mittler Rebbe and the times in Samach Tzedek, and even going back to the times of the Alter Rebbe to some degree. The Rebbe is pointing out these historical truths. And the Rebbe is saying, therefore, there's no reason to be ma'orer something which is not there, any type of machloikis, uflakerim, which doesn't exist. That's what the Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is pushing back against that. The Rebbe is not attacking any individual. And the Rebbe is not coming certainly with any type of animosity. Now, when somebody says something, for example, if somebody would say something disrespectful, inappropriate against someone's Rebbe, he has a halachic imperative to be moiche. He has no halachic imperative to scream at the person. There's no halachic imperative to call the person names. There's a halachic imperative to be very, very firm and say, this is beyond the pale. This is not okay. This doesn't work. Trash it. Put it away. Never
Would that
say
work
this again.
before you have a relationship? Or that's your practice is if someone says something about the Rebbe, even before you have a relationship with them, you'll be moicha? You
Again,
recommend being moicha?
the mecha could come in many, many forms, right? In other words, if somebody tells me something that I feel is something, somebody is saying something narish, which is coming from a place of ignorance, I don't get worked up because I'm going in with a non-defensive posture to begin with. I don't get worked up. I can even laugh if it's something that's so narish that not every single response has to be serious, and sometimes you accomplish a lot more with humor. You have to be able to, and also you have to be able to distinguish if somebody is making a joke about Chabad culture, which has its humorous points, or if someone's actually saying something nasty against Nesidei Reinu. That's very, very different. If a person made up a joke at about Chabad culture. We have culture. There are cultural aspects to Lubavitch that are not Halik or anything like that. It's just like any place has their style, their culture. You can't get offended by everything. You can't take offense when somebody's, making a joke. You have to be able to take that also. When a person crosses a line, then something has to be said. You can't let something just go. Now, how exactly you respond to it, how you quote unquote make the mecha, that's secondary. Depends what the situation is. Depends if you're one-on-one. Depends if you're in a public forum. Whatever. I mean, these things are pratim. To be honest, I don't encounter a lot of this type of stuff because I believe today. Again, like I said, I don't look for hisnagdus. Mela, I don't find hisnagdus. So I'm not actively engaging in people who will actually, maybe because Pashut, they have a sense that there's a sense of comfort. There's not a sense of clashing that I don't actually encounter this type of talk or this type of stuff. Again, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of trauma that's from the past. We have to realize that it's from the past. That's what trauma is, that a person was traumatized in the past and he's carrying it over to the future. It's a beautiful sefer by Rabbi Hillel Zaltzman called Samarkand. And in the sefer, in the end, there's a postscript where he says basically the people being rounded up and sent away to Siberia kind of stopped in the 30s and the 40s. In the 50s, you didn't really have people being, maybe a person could lose his job or whatever. Nobody was really being rounded up and shot. But he says the trauma that remained from those early years, he says, could we have done more? Could we have done more afatz mayonis behind the Iron Curtain? Maybe. But we're so traumatized from back in the day that stayed with us. We have to free ourselves from that trauma and get on with the program.
Who influenced? Were you influenced by someone in this with this mahalach, or is just did someone model this for you in terms
Absolutely.
of this?
The Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is, you don't see anything other than this in the Igris, in the Sichis. This is exactly what the Rebbe says, continues to say again and again and again. And all you need to do is buy into it.
It's very interesting. Like, in the way people describe the interactions that Rebbe had with Gedolim, like in Yechidus, there was like, this was the tone. Like Farbrengens, the Rebbe like came across, more gvudadik when he dealt with antagonists.
So again, that's what I was
Is that a wrong observation? Is that a wrong?
Again, the mecha depends on the context. When it's private is one type of thing. When a person makes a public statement against Chabad, the Rebbe will have to respond publicly, and that public statement is obviously going to come out in a firm way, as it should. Everything depends on context.
Right. It almost seems like what you're saying is that the interactions that you're modeling from the Rebbe are like the way the Rebbe dealt with, Gedolei Halitoyim like one-on-one in letters, but when you're speaking to 20,000 people or the whole world, it's a different. It's a different.
Right. As Lubavitchers, every Lubavitcher sees himself as a spokesman for Lubavitch. We have to realize when you're engaging with people, you're not engaging with a public, you're engaging with individuals. And individuals are tired people. You have to actually appreciate, you have to be able to appreciate if a person is going to engage with the Yeshiva Shevelt, with the literature world, you have to have an appreciation for them. You have to see their milas. You have to actually appreciate the Kavod HaTorah, the Limud HaTorah. You have to appreciate the Tefillah B'Tzibur. You have to appreciate certain elements. You have to appreciate the milas. You have to actually look at your fellow Yid from a positive, a good place, and you say you are a wonderful person, and believe it, and Taka believe it, and that comes off. People see when you're talking down to them or when you're actually enjoy engaging with them.
So that's a fascinating point, which I often hear the frustration from my non-Lubavitcher colleagues and friends. They get a sense, and always each person felt his Rebbe is the best and his derech is the best, but there was always like, what can I learn? There's the Yud Beis Shvatim, and they each complement each other. But for many Lubavitchers, at least the way the non-Lubavitchers view it, it's not as if there's another nusach and there's another, like, Lubavitch is the best and everyone has to become a Lubavitcher. They get to them, that's very hard to absorb. And the language you're using, as if like Lubavitchers have what to learn from other communities have what to learn from Lubavitch, and we can collaborate. But that when Lubavitchers come across as if they have the answer to everything, and there's nothing they can learn from someone else, people find that very off-putting.
Obviously, that's in the Mishnah. That's been the truth when the Mishnah was written. It's the truth today. We have what to learn from every individual. That doesn't mean that we're not absolutely 110% proud Lubavitchers and say Ashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, and we're excited to be Chassidim of the Rebbe, and we believe that the Rebbe's Torah contains everything in it, and it's beautiful, and it's reich, and it's geschmack, and that Chassidus is wonderful, and that we want to share Chassidus, etc. That's not a stira to appreciating other people's milas. That there's no reason why that has to be at the expense of saying, look, here's a community that puts an emphasis, for example, on shiurei Torah, puts an emphasis that every younger man has a chavrusa in the evening or whatever. That's a valuable inyan. It's a beautiful thing. It's an important thing, and there's no stira to being completely ecstatic and excited and proud of who you are, and seeing the milas of your fellow Yidden. In the same way, for example, that Satmar has an amazing Bikur Cholim program, an amazing community structure, and how they're able to look out for each other and things like that. Amazing milas, and how other people have other milas, right? There's every person has there's what to learn. It doesn't take away from your from your pride, from your excitement, from your passion about spreading Chassidus. And spreading Chassidus doesn't necessitate the other person becoming Lubavitch. I'm very, very clear when I interact with people that I'm not looking to make anybody Lubavitch. I am looking to spread Chassidus. It's not a secret. It's not confidential. I'm very, very clear about the agenda. I have two agendas. I tell everybody two agendas. Agenda number one is Avos Yisrael, Pashut, coming together, getting to know other people, getting comfortable with other people, trying to bring Achdus in Klal Yisrael, A, and B, spreading Chassidus. And the two things connect to each other, because L'Poyel, learning Chassidus is a vehicle for actually bringing Yidden together. B'chlal learning Torah is Marbim Shalom Be'olam, but especially Pnimius HaTorah, Nishmasa De'iraisa, which brings the Achdus even stronger. So I'm very clear about the agenda. The agenda does not include making, quote, making people Lubavitch, or, quote, trying to convert people. That's not part of the agenda. It's not that there is no agenda. There is an agenda. The agenda is not to impose my view on someone else. The agenda is to share the beauty, the wonder, and the amazing Torah and outlook of Chassidus, whether it's the Rebbe's Torah, whether it's Tanya, whether it's whatever, Derech Mitzvah. That's the agenda. The agenda is to share. Obviously, when I'm engaging with people, and I want to hear what they have to share also. The Seder. That's part of just engaging with people, just part of being interested in people. Part of loving other Yidden is just wanting to hear from them, wanting to to share with them and to let them share with you and to hear.
This podcast is sponsored by Koil Rabbanei Chabad. Koil Rabbanei Chabad is a community of experienced Rabbanim, aspiring Rabbanim, over 100 Shluchim and Anash from around the world, staying fresh in sugyas of community Rabbanos, learning over 8 to 10 hours a week, Gemara, Tur, Beis Yosef, Rosh Koil, Sgan Rosh Koil, senior poskim, follow-up, Chavrusa placement, to be able to stay fresh in these sugyas, and to learn not just shimush and practical psak, but also shimush in the room of Rabbanos. The Koil has so far learned over the past 2 years the sugyas of Tvilas Koilim and Agalas Koilim, Hilchas Nida, and we're soon going to be starting Hilchas Mikvois, and you can join at any time. Schedule a conversation with the Rosh Koilel today at koilelrabbanechabad.org. This podcast is sponsored by Koilel Aliba de Hilchasa, the brand new Koilel with the Rosh Koilel, Rav Yaakov Goldstein, Sgan Rosh Koilel, Rav Menachem Rottenberg, Menal Poyel, Rav Mendel Weisfish, all active, experienced, Moida Hayra. Follows an 8-year syllabus. Every 6 months is a new topic, broken up into subtopics. Until Pesach, we're learning the halachas of Hilchas Avelus and Bikur Cholim. After Pesach, we're learning workplace halacha, Hilchas Ribis, Hilchas Baltolin, and Hilchas Yichud. It's a serious learning Gemara, Shulchan Aruch inside. 3 hours a week of Chavrusa learning. Help find you a Chavrusa, set up a Chavrusa. And then there's 2 in-depth shiurim per week, 2 live shiurim per week. And it's serious learning. Someone that has a busy schedule, 3 to 5 hours a week. Schedule a conversation with the Manal Poyel today at koilelad.com.
Do you think that most of your friends and colleagues as shluchim and others that are involved in the world of Afatzas Hamayonos have a similar perspective, that ideally they would want to make everyone Lubavitchers? Because I know amongst shluchim, I can name a few names of Alta de shluchim that to them was like, for certain people it's better they don't become Lubavitchers. They'd rather send them to Eshet Torah, or I know Rabbi Posner Senior and Emmanuel Shachat. Like they said openly, like, they think, yeah, we want to be Meifitz Pnimius at Torah, but like to make someone a Lubavitcher, that's not my goal. But other shluchim would vehemently tell you, no, if I can make someone go all the way, that is the ultimate goal. Do you think that is this your personal opinion, or do you think this is the majority opinion?
Let's put it this way. There were a lot of people over the years who became Lubavitch. There were a lot of people who came from Litvshi Yeshivas who became Lubavitch. They were niskarev through various people. Those various people learned with them to the point that they became inspired and that they became Lubavitch. The people who were mekarev them, were they looking to try to chap these chevra to make them Lubavitch? Probably. Is it a good thing that they became Lubavitch? Ask them. I think they'll all say yes. So Lepoil Mamish, these people who had that mindset, were they matzliach to some degree? Absolutely. And is that a good thing? Again, ask the people who were niskarev to Lubavitch. I don't know how many of them regret becoming Lubavitch. I believe that they're all happy with their choice. So I'm not here to say that that everybody has to see things my way. I'm just saying that by and large, I believe in the big picture, as far as furthering the work of the Baal Shem Tov and the Chassidus Meinesecha Chutza. And what is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is not that the entire world is all going to be like me. The ultimate goal is that Chassidus will be spread out to the entire world. Each person, the way that they are, will receive some aspect, some inyan of Chassidus. And I'm excited to share it because I believe in it and I enjoy it. And if I enjoy something and I love my fellow Yid, I want to share it with my fellow Yid. So am I going to tell you that there aren't people who have a different point of view and who think that maybe you have to push somebody to become Lubavitch v'chulu v'chulu? Maybe there are, and let them do whatever they do. In other words, when we say that people are traumatized, let's put it this way: there's trauma to go around, right? There's Lubavitch who's traumatized by, the Litvak, who thinks that every Litvak probably hates my Rebbe and probably doesn't like me and probably thinks I'm Apokaitis and my wine is Ayin Nesech, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the Litvak who thinks probably every Lubavitcher is probably trying to convince me that the Rebbe is Mashiach and probably wants me to say Yechi and wants to kidnap my kids and wants to convert me, v'chulu, v'chulu, right? There's enough trauma to go around. We're all traumatized, right? Now, trauma doesn't come from nowhere. Right. In other words, the reason that we're traumatized, that every person is out to get me, is because there were people who were out to get me, and the reason that the other person is traumatized, that the Lubavitcher probably wants to convert me and probably wants to chap me, because there are people who became Lubavitchers who got fully involved. Trauma doesn't come from nowhere, but the point is we have to get past the trauma. We have to get past that and focus on the job of spreading Chassidus to the world. Kol chad lefum she'ura dilei. Each person from whatever place however he sees that it's the best way to go about it.
So are you inferring that those that were aiming to make Lubavitchers in Lakewood and these secret, I have cousins that were in Lakewood that they went to Tanya Shiurim and so on and so forth. So those that were going to Ki'ilu bring people to the Rebbe and make Lubavitchers, do you feel that there were negative repercussions because of that and because they were doing this sneaky Tanya Shiurim against the rules to chop people? Like if that was that a bad thing?
Bad is a judgment. In other words, I'm the last person to judge anyone. And lepoil mamish, wonderful things will always come from Tanya Shiurim. And lepoil mamish, there were people who became Lubavitch, and again, who I believe are happy that they became Lubavitch. So how could it be a bad thing? Lepoil mamish, I believe every person has to go with
this led to trauma.
What's that?
This led to trauma that everyone's all scared that Lubavitch is coming to make a secret Tanya share in my thing
that's a repercussion.
To chop my kid.
That's a repercussion. That's a fact. We're not arguing whether that thing exists and why it exists. It exists. And the reason is due to this. Does that mean that therefore those Tanya Shirim were a negative thing? I'm not going to say that, but everything has repercussions.
So I get, I'm asking more of a halacha l'maisa question. Right now, if someone is listening to this conversation and he's Thursday night, he goes and he sneaks a bacher away against his Rosh Hashiva's wishes to make a Tanya share. And, I mean, I had cases like that when I was in Toronto. We used to go and chab bacherim I had to wake up at 4 a.m. to do a Tanya share before his daf yomi at 5 a.m. and we secretly somewhere. So would you recommend that maybe they should pick different methods?
I do not promote that. That's not what I'm promoting over here in our conversation. That's not what I'm promoting.
You're not promoting that they should be sneaky Tanya Shirim.
Correct.
So it should be more.
I'm promoting something. I'm promoting an attitude, right? I'm not trying to put down anything. I'm trying to promote something. What I'm trying to promote is to reach out to people from a place of Avos Yisrael, from a place of sharing something good that you taka believe in, that therefore you want to share it with someone else. That's what I'm promoting.
Now the
I'm coming from a
elephant.
positive place, not from a negative place.
Right. No, I hear that. Now the elephant in the room is, and obviously this is a whole completely different conversation, but like when you engage someone on the Mashiach topic, so I'll just share my personal trauma. Obviously I lived through those years. Maybe I'm a drop younger than you, but it was like if I see a Mashiach flag, my blood pressure goes up. So it's probably not the healthiest thing. I'm just sharing. If you were to put a monitor on my hearth, wherever you put it on my monitor, I'm gonna walk down a car. I see a Messiah is here. Like I get, it does something. There's a physical something going on. So it could be I'm coming from a biased place, and I got to work through that trauma. Okay, but when there's the younger man that's now going around trying to get Gedolei Yisrael to sign on that it's not the apicursus to say that Rebbe's Mashiach can come in Amesim, right? And I saw that project. I got nervous. I sent him a message. I said, "What are you doing over here? Is this a good thing? Is this?" So he said, "So in your conversations with Litvaks that are troubled by this, certain Lubavitchers and the Mashiach issue, particularly in Eretz Yisrael, like one response is it's a bunch of Meshigoyim, ignore them. What's your response? Do you say it's not so bad, it's okay? Blah, blah, blah. Like what once you're engaging them in the conversation, which path do you recommend?
Okay, so first of all, I never allow myself to be bullied into any type of conversation that I don't want to have. I'm always happy to. In other words, I'll always maintain control of the conversation that I want to have. I'm not looking to have a particular conversation. I will not have that conversation. Just because somebody asks me a question, I'm not mechuyev to answer. I'll answer whatever. I'm going to control the interaction, and I'm not going to allow myself to be dragged into any type of anything. There's a lot of aspects to this, and I don't know how many we'll be able to get to. There's a Lubavitch point of view. I think that to a certain degree, Lubavitchers are more traumatized by Mashiach flags than non-Lubavitchers. I would say the healthiest thing for Lubavitchers, especially those who are Oisik and Afatzis Hamayonis, is to recognize that Mashiach flags are here to stay. And signs about Messiah is here and whatever, good, bad, or otherwise, it's a fact of life. And you can't get riled up every single time you see it, or your blood pressure is going to go up, which is not a good thing. So you have to kind of make peace with reality, right? One nakuda. Another nakuda is, from a fellow Lubavitcher point of view, it's important not to disconnect yourself from any Lubavitchers. I don't try to disconnect myself from any Lubavitchers. I might say, this is not something that I do, but I'm not looking to put down other Lubavitchers or say that they're Mishagoyim or they're this or that. Hagam, people do things that to me is weird, is strange, but I'm not in the business of disconnecting myself from other people. Furthermore, trying to convince myself that if I disconnect myself from someone else, then people are going to think I'm from the normal Lubavitchers. You're a Lubavitcher, nobody thinks you're normal. Okay, so it's important to recognize that cutting yourself off from the quote Mishagoyim doesn't make you normal. Because as long as you're a Lubavitcher, whether you have words on your yarmulke, you don't have words on your yarmulke, you have a pin, you don't have a pin, you have a flag, you don't have a flag, makes no difference. You're a Lubavitcher, and people recognize you as such. And you have to just recognize that this is that this is the way it is. Now, at the same time, I'm engaging individuals. I'm not coming from some sort of a organization, I'm engaging people from a place of one-on-one. And I'm talking to people from myself. And I say what I believe. I'm not here to put anybody down. I'm not here to defend certain things. I'm not here to negate certain things. I'm only here to promote what I believe is needs to be done, what our shlichus is, what the Rebbe wants us to do, and what we believe in. So, do I believe that certain practices and certain things that people do could impede sometimes Afatzis Hamayonis? The point is really a moot point, because people are going to do what they're going to do. And I don't look down at people who do something. Hagam, I might think that it impedes maybe my aspect of Afatzis Hamayonis, because I don't judge that their motives are bad. I believe even the people who are putting up the signs and this and that and flags, which most of that stuff I do not agree with. At the same time, I don't judge them as coming from a bad place. I believe that they're coming from a good place. Again, I'm not talking about specific people. I'm talking about, a large swath of people. And I'm not, again, once you start getting into individuals, I'm not going to sign off that every single person is normal, but that's not negeya, right? The point is, I don't judge people and say, if only these people wouldn't exist, then all of a sudden, Mashiach would have been here already. I do what I believe that I'm supposed to do, and other people will do how they'll try to be Mekadev Mashiach in the way that they feel that they need to be Mekadev Mashiach. Hagam, I feel that their way is maybe impeding my way.
Well, just to be honest, in parentheses, do you, is your opinion yes or no that the Zehusei Shel Mashiach push in Lubavitch really slowed down Afatzas Hamayonis by the Litvaks quite significantly? Are you not convinced that's the case?
Let's put it this way. I wanted to separate two things. I don't believe that Pirsum Zehusei Shel Mashiach is part of our mission statement by the Rebbe.
Right.
I think the Rebbe wrote that clearly. Ein chiyuv l'chapis miu Mashiach. So that's one nakuda. A. B. Am I going to say that the reason that we haven't been successful to a large degree in Hafatzas Hamayonis, to the degree that perhaps we should have been successful, is all because of someone else's fault, as opposed to our own fault of not engaging more people and not coming with this attitude that I described before? In other words, maybe it's more attributed to the fact that we're still seeing Misnagdim all over the place. I can make an equal argument for that. I'm not ready to say that this is the reason why we haven't been successful. This is the reason why people still have an issue with Lubavitch. No, I've been around before Gimel Tammuz, and people had an issue, before, and people had an issue even before that, and even before that, and the Rebbe was always pushing the envelope. And the reason why people had an issue with Lubavitch always changed, right? Originally, it was because he put on tefillin. Haki put on tefillin with someone else. Then, when the Rebbe came out, what did the Rebbe do next? It's an eshek. Then it's like, okay, tefillin, meilas, necessity deraisa. Eshek, you're going, unmarried girls, v'cholo, v'cholo. Okay, so what did the Rebbe do? Pushed it further, mezuzah, right? Mezuzah, you're saying it's a shmirah, meilah neshek, okay, whatever. Oh, Shabbos Kodesh, but then what came after that came chveis, eis b'sefer Torah. Eis b'sefer Torah. Meilah, mezuzah is the chvart hamitzah, deraisa. What's eis b'sefer Torah? What's this in the kudah, right? Then came Mashiach. Then came Meilah, everything else, of course. Those Lubavitchers we loved. Forgot. Those Lubavitchers we loved. Just these new ones. This is the ones that have the issue.
So I'm finally getting the slightly traumatized Rabbi Simpson over here. So there's part of you that also has frustration.
Again, it's a recognition of reality. It's a recognition of reality. But the first step to becoming untraumatized is making peace with reality, recognizing that reality is what it is. It is what it is. And blaming this one or blaming that one, whatever, is not going to get us anywhere. There's work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. There's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Yidden who are waiting to hear a Chassidic word, right? Who are waiting to be engaged, who are waiting to be reached out to. And that we have an achrayus to reach out to share, not to convert, not to impose, not to convert or whatever. Just to spread Chassidus. That's our mandate. Baal Shem Tov went up to Eichel Mashiach. He asked him, Mashiach said, we have a mandate to spread Chassidus. It's an aspect of bringing Mashiach. It's not in other words, it's not putting anything down. It's benoisiv to everything. Benoisiv to the Gemara, benoisiv to the Nigla, and benoisiv to the Halacha, and benoisiv to the Davening, and benoisiv to everything. There's another Nakuda which needs to be shared, and we need to share it. And we have an achrayus to that. We got to get with the program.
So let's say you have someone listening to this, and he lives in a community with not Lubavitcher shuls, and he's grown up to community politics, the Misnagdim. What would you say is step one beyond, let's say, stop using the label Misnagid? What would be step one to be able to engage people? Is it, I'm going to give an A or B. Is it just to become friendly with them, or is it to try to make a shir Chassidus?
It's, I would say, neither of the above. It is value them. Value your fellow Yidden. See their specific milas. Benoisif to being a Yid as a chelik elikami mal mamish, like all Yidden. See the actual mila in another Yid. See the milas. See the value to the shiurei Torah. See the value to these inyanim. When you value a person, and you taka believe that person is a tayr Yid and taka a special person, has special qualities, v'chulu v'chulu, automatically you don't have to work on tailoring your interaction to a particular way. Automatically your interaction is going to be a positive one, because you look at that person, you see value. And if a person throws out something necessarily negative at you, just let it roll off. Look, I'm talking 20 years later. I'm not telling you.
What do you do with the? I sat in yeshiva for 20 years, hearing people make fun of the way Misnagdim daven, making fun of the way Misnagdim learn, making fun of the way Misnagdim have Avos Yisrael, hearing them make fun of the way Misnagdim eat, hearing them make fun of Misnagdim go on vacation. So how do I get out of that mentality? I've been indoctrinated by my Mashpia, by my Rosh Hashivas, with this negative attitude. How do I take Rabbi Simpson's perspective and undo 20 years of a different perspective?
Okay, so hopefully that's not all that you heard in yeshiva. Hopefully you heard a lot of good things about Avos Yisrael and about Achdus Yisrael and about the value of a fellow Yid, v'chulu, v'chulu, v'chulu. And look, let's put it this way. It's not only that you've heard things one way. Other people in other yeshivas have heard similar things about Chabad. And what we would like for them is to be mishtachrer from their preconceived notions about Chabad. So we need to model that and reflect that by lehishtachrer from maybe things that a person absorbed in yeshiva one way or another way. It's easiest done one-on-one. When you meet individual people and you see tayr Yidden, really tayr Yidden, special Yidden, and you engage with them, it's actually not difficult. It's actually not hard to do that. You see a tayr Yid in front of you, a Yid who's sitting, learning, davening, v'chulu. Assume always best intentions, and you'll see that reflected back to you. It's really not hard. Now, again, I'm telling you, I'm talking to you 20 years of living over here. I definitely had to, let's put it this way, integrate a lot of trauma. I definitely had to process this stuff over the years, but it's doable. It's very, very doable. And look, again, like I said, we're not good at fighting. We're not good at antagonism. We're good at Avos Yisrael. That's what we're good at. That's our superpower. That's our strength. That's the only thing we need to lean into. It's not necessarily always fun, especially if somebody comes at you with boxing gloves, v'chulu, v'chulu. All you want to do is just punch back, right? But lepoil, that's not your superpower. That's not your koyach. Your koyach does not lie in that. Your koyach lies in ava, in chesed, in achdus yisro. That's what we claim our koyach is, right? In kol alev lekol echad. That's how we promote ourselves. So we have to actually believe in that.
Hey, are you looking for top talent without the crazy costs? Well, you're in good luck, because I'm advising at Talent Sam. They help companies hire amazing people from South Africa for roles like customer success, finance, operations, marketing, and sales. All and more at around 70% less than Western employee cost. They can find the right person in days with no recruitment fee, and they handle all HR, tech, and compliance. If that sounds like something you or someone you know could use, let me know and I'll connect you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the video. Hey, if you're listening right now and you've been feeling stuck, like you're running in circles or living on autopilot, I want to invite you to something different. I call it coaching out of the matrix, and it's about breaking free from the patterns, fears, and false limits that break you from living fully as the person God created you to be. My approach is holistic. We work on mindset, emotions, physical well-being, and a deeper spiritual identity so the change lasts. And here's the twist. You only pay if you're satisfied with the session, because I believe in results, not hype. If you're ready for a shift, email me at LevyHolisticCoach@gmail.com and let's see what opens up for you. That's LevyHolisticCoach@gmail.com. Coaching out of the matrix. Your new chapter starts right here. Enjoy the rest of the video.
I think, Mashpia and Rosh Hashivas that are listening to this, I think this is, to me, it's Dvarim Pshutim based on Chassidus, but I'd say societally, this is a new perspective that I think that it's hard to fault the younger Dor for walking into a kollel and wrinkling their nose at the way things are done. But like once you get to know these yidden, it's beautiful. It's yeah. I mean, I got lucky because I have a lot of cousins. I mean, today the world's a lot more integrated. It's a much smaller world, so there's a lot more exposure, and I think that automatically this is happening already. So much more. But like I think that with a little bit of a paradigm shift of like the same approach we take to every yid, and over here it's even more. It's right. Not just that we're over here. We have what to learn from them. I mean, like
we have what to learn from every yid. We have what to learn from every yid.
You were quoting the Mishnah in Avos. It's much more than that. It's not loimin mikaladam. We even learned from Achi Teufel and from Rishayim. We're dealing over here with people that taka have legitimate milas over us, which we can be makabel from. Are you saying that? Are you saying that, or am I taking your words further than you're intending?
No, absolutely, 100%. I would say it's not about over, under, or this versus that. It's just about seeing the milas in every single yid. In other words, seeing the milas. Every yid has milas, seeing the milas in every single yid. Approaching them from a place of Perek Lamed Beis Tanya, Perek Lamed Tanya, especially V'hevei shval ruach b'fnei kol ha'adam, v'hevei be'emes la'amitoi b'fnei kol ha'adam, to actually approach from a place of humility, not humility in the sense of I think less of myself, in a place from a place of I'm not imposing my nefesh abahamis ego on the other person, right? Not that I'm not coming from a place where I'm humble about about Lubavitch and about Chabad and about that. I'm just humble as a person, as an individual. My yeshus and my nefesh bahamis, I'm not bringing that into the picture in the way that I engage with other people. And I will say that I don't know as far as yeshivas, I would assume that that's not the talk that you hear in yeshivas today. I can tell you certainly by us in Cincinnati, it's not the sprach. That's not the sprach at all. Adarabbe, the sprach is to point out the milas of all Yidden, and to and again, that's to me healthy. That's just becoming.
So let's say another few practical questions. So let's say someone is looking to do afatzas hamayanos. He's a real Kabbalah Zelnik. He wants to do mivtzoyim and afatzas hamayanos. So like there's this notion of let me just make 1,000 copies of some publication and just put it everywhere to show the world how smart the Rebbe is and how the godliness of the Rebbe and the beauty of the Rebbe's Torah. Personally, for Hungarian crowds and the modern Orthodox crowds, I think that they love it. I see a mixed feedback, but I'm speaking strictly from a strategic perspective. Like many people are turned off by that. Like you're trying to stuff your Torah into my shul, and you're throwing all this shemus on the table every week. There's 50 copies of a sikha that everyone basically no one looks at. Maybe one person in the shul. Do you see that as being effective? Like just flooding every Litvish shul with sikhas of the Rebbe every Friday?
It's not something that I do.
So from a, if you're advising people, do you think, do you see that as being counterproductive?
That the point is moot, whether or not it's counterproductive. People are going to do what they're going to do.
No, people are looking for best practices. This is not an area. This is almost like shluchim get together and they're like, they give advice to each other, and they learn new things. The Olam HaShlichus, it's not, it's been around for 1,000 years. This is cutting edge practices over here, and every kinnis they kvetch things. So I'm saying, like, assuming there was a kinnis of people that are like trying to, bring the word of the Baal Shem Tov, to kollels and so on and so forth.
It's not what I would promote. I would promote something else entirely. That's what we've been promoting this entire conversation, right? What I would promote is genuinely see other people's milas, genuinely engage, genuinely, right? Approach with Avos Yisrael, get to know people, become friends with people. That in and of itself is already valuable. Again, if the person never, ever opens a Sefer Chassidus, he'll never learn. That itself is a good thing. You're becoming friendly with Yidden. That's a good thing. That's a positive thing, right? If the opportunity presents itself, and there are opportunities galore. The opportunities galore. If the opportunity presents itself, and you can reach out to a person and suggest, again, from a place of, I have something beautiful, I have something amazing that I would like to share. If the other person is interested, people are interested. People are interested. It's not a hard sell. Chassidus is amazing. It's taka amazing, right? You have to actually believe in it. If you're just trying to make a sale, if you're just trying to push or whatever, you're inauthentic to yourself, and therefore you come across inauthentic to the other person, and nobody's interested in being put upon. But if you actually love another person, and therefore you engage with them lishma, just for the sake of getting to know another Yid, right? So you've already, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya Perek Lamed Beis. It's all there. It's all in Tanya, right? So that's number one. You've already succeeded. It's impossible not to succeed when you engage with another Yid with Avos Yisrael, because you've already done Avos Yisrael. You've already connected to another Yid. That's already a positive thing. From that place, the ground is fertile for sharing if somebody else is interested. A lot of people are interested. And if somebody is not interested, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Not everybody is mechuyev. Just like not every single person that you asked to put on tefillin and said yes, you didn't get offended. If somebody told you that they're not interested in learning Chassidus, they're not interested. It's okay. It's fine. There are enough people who are interested. There's enough to keep you busy, fill your entire schedule. You know what I mean? And even a person, if a person doesn't want to learn Chassidus, I still love them. They're taka good friends. I have a lot of good chaverim who have never opened up a Sefer Chassidus, and quite possibly never will open up a Sefer Chassidus, but I hold as very, very dear, precious friends, Taira Yidden, really, really good people. So daven with kavanu, learn well, who are Geschmacke Yidden, etc., etc. Do I wish I can share with them what Chassidus has to offer? Of course I do. But do I look at them in any negative way because they're not interested in Chassidus or whatever? No, chas v'shalom. They're tired of Yidden.
What would you say is the area that's most, that you've learned the most from your interactions with the non-Chabad community in Cincinnati? What taught you the most?
Which quality you're saying?
Yeah.
Honestly, what I personally like is the quiet in the shul. That's me personally. I mean, I appreciate a davening in a quiet, the kavod beis hakneses and kavod beis hamedrash. That is something that I really appreciate. Yeah, you're asking me personally. I'm not saying that there aren't other milas. That's just one mila that.
So, what taka practically can you recommend from their culture that our pulpit rabbis can take to encourage more kavod beis hakneses?
Yeah, to recognize Dalif Nimiyata Oimid. We're talking to the Eibishter. And like the Gemara says, "Hakriveu nalefecha secha hayirtzecha yayisafanecha," which means that we at Chol HaPachis we shouldn't treat the Eibishter any less than we would treat talking to a human being of flesh and blood. And just like when you approach a human being of flesh and blood, you approach him with respect, with basic decorum and basic menschlichkeit. You're not running all over the place. You're not noisy. You're not this. You're. There's a certain covet. So to encourage that, in a positive way. Again, there's the poil mamish, the Lubavitcher show. There's a certain heimishkeit. There's a certain shtibel element to it. There's a certain, Chassidim verbringt always in shoals, and there was more of a conversation. But davening is davening. There's before davening, there's after davening, there's verbringt, is shiur. But there's a time of davening, and you have a Siman Chav Gimel in Igeres HaKodesh, and there's a Siman Chav Daled in Igeres HaKodesh, and there's a Mittler Rebbe, and there's a Rebbe Rashav, and there's enough material, Again, we have to reach out to Lubavitchers also with love, by the way. Just because they're Lubavitcher, that doesn't mean that therefore I talking whatever. No, with the same love. With the same love, and to recognize that it's something it's an area that apparently it's always been an issue, right? Gewalt, had Masayi is alanu l'meikish. Yeah.
Okay, this has been a big schos and a pleasure. Yashikah, for your time. Would you like to share for a minute about your podcast and history and when people could find out more about that?
Sure, happy to share. So the podcast is we're focused really on ancient Jewish history. So we're talking Bayis Rishon, Bayis Sheni. That's really the area that we're focused on. The idea is to integrate the midrashim, to kind of dig through the midrashim, to kind of understand, to create a narrative out of the midrashim. A lot of times the midrashim seem like it's kind of like disjointed nakudis here, there, like one nakuda here, one nakuda there, and kind of put together a narrative, not in the sense of the little medrash says, where we're kind of trying to create an anthology of all the midrashim, but to actually understand the meaning behind the medrash. And to kind of put Jewish history in context, in the broader context, in the world context.
Can you give a small example?
I'll give you an example of things that I'm working on right now. So right now I'm working on the three malachim she'en lehem chedek le'olam haba. So we have Yeravim ben Nevat, Achav, and Menashe ben Chizkiah. And originally I thought I would do maybe 1 hour on each. It's turning out to be maybe 2 hours on each, or maybe more. Yeravim ben Nevat, just for example, Yeravim ben Nevat, he erected 2 Eglei Hazav. And it's clear from the story that he was trying to imitate Aaron HaKohen with the original Egel Hazav. What's the Havim in it? What's the Havim in it to imitate Aaron when it's clear that the Egel Hazav, the Yidden were punished for that? So clearly, Yeravim ben Nevat saw the whole story of the Egel Hazav in a completely different light. How did he see it? The Psukim are there. How do we understand? Like what's going on? What was his narrative of the Egel? That's a mechkar. That's a study. That's as far as Yeravim goes, right? Achov, what's this whole idea of Avodah Zarah, of Baal? What exactly is the Avodah Zarah of Baal? What's Baal? What's Asherah? What's the interplay between them? What exactly happened on Har HaKarmel between Eliyahu and the Nevi Habal? Where were the Nevi Asherah? They don't appear in the story. Kulmine, what happened with Kerem Lenovis? All these different aspects. Menashe ben Chizkiah, he was Doirish Drashis Shel Doifi. He had these false drushes that he would. The Gemara gives us 2 examples, but doesn't elaborate. What are the drushes Shel Doifi? How is Menashe different than the Avodah Zarah of Achav? What's going on over here? And when you really break it down, it's mind blowing. It's fascinating. The understanding of the struggles that the Yidden had, and what does it mean when the Yidden served Avodah Zarah, and what does it mean that they were poischem al shtei seipim? Kitzer, a deep understanding of everything that really went on back in the days, using the midrashim, using other contexts.
It's a lot of limud of Navi Be'iyun. it's
not just the limit of Navi.
It's
a lot. It's look. The Elam is welcome to check it out.
What's the name of the podcast?
It's called Jewish Histories from the Inside Out.
The Inside Out.
We just put out our last one. We put out 2 hours on Dasan and Aviram.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we
how many episodes so far?
Put out 9 episodes so far, and yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Grace and Yashikayach. You should have a tzlachadik zman in yeshiva coming up. Enjoy the last wing of your summer, and people should be able to take a lot from your. It's a derech chadosh shehavi yoshen to be able to grow in this area. So Yashikayach, thank you for sharing.
Hey, are you looking for Chassidic stories to say to your kids by bedtime or for Malava Malka about 10 minutes? Well, you're in luck because there's a new podcast called Chassidic Stories by Eden Hanoga. Check it out. It'll be in the description. Hey, I hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share to help bring it to more people, which brings Mashiach. And if you want coaching that actually shifts you, just reach out to me at leviholisticcoach@gmail.com. See you in the next video.